light stood over the north quarter a little before 3 in the morning. My brother was already gone by then, gone down ahead of me into the dark, past where my voice could reach him. My own truck sat dead in the grass behind me. Out across the bottom, in that cold white pouring up out of the ground, 40 head of my cattle lay in a ring they had never walked into. Dead, every one. And I was running. Not toward anything I could save. I ran the way a jackrabbit runs when the shadow slides over it, low and stupid and certain, already knowing I would be the only one of us to see the sun come up. That is the middle of it. I have had 20 years to put the order right. The order is the only part I ever understood, and I understood it too late to do anybody a bit of good. We had been 3 generations on Harlan Flats by the fall of 1974. My grandfather broke that sod. Josiah Harlan came out to the high plains with a wife, a walking plow, and a younger brother named Elias. He put up a soddy on the rise where the main house stands now. Damn near starved twice before the place would carry a cow to the acre, which out there it barely will in a good year. There were no good years to speak of at first. Just wind and grass, and a sky that came down on all of it, with no edge anywhere to break it. The flat took his brother Elias in a way nobody in my family ever said plain. It kept his money. It kept his back and most of his teeth. He stayed anyhow, because a man who breaks ground like that cannot afterward admit it was a mistake. My father was born in that soddy. I was born in the frame house that replaced it, in a back bedroom in a February blizzard. The doctor did not make it out from Collie in time. My grandmother and a neighbor woman caught me. I have always liked that about myself, if a man can like a thing like that. A Harlan Flats calf, same as the rest of them, dropped on the ground in a storm and left to figure it out. My name is Travis Harlan. In the fall I am talking about, I was 38 years old. I had run the outfit 6 years by then, since my father's heart quit on him in the seat of a swather in the summer of '68. He went face down in a windrow of cut hay. The swather kept on in a slow circle until it fetched up against the fence. My mother watched the whole thing from the garden and could not get to him in time. She was never right after that. Died the next winter. People said pneumonia. I have my own opinion. Grief will stop a person's clock as sure as any bug will. It just takes the long way around. So it came down to me and my brother. Dylan was 9 years younger, 29 that fall. He had the good half of everything our family carried. Easy where I was hard. He could gentle a colt that wanted to kill me. He could sit at the co-op counter in Collie and have the whole place laughing inside 10 minutes. The girls in town had all taken a run at him one time or another, and he had let most of them down soft, which is a thing not one man in 100 manages. I loved my brother the plain, unspoken way. A man loves somebody that he has worked beside, since they were both too young to be trusted with the work. We never said it. That was not our family, and it was not our kind of men. Out there, a man says it another way. He says it by getting up at 4 in the cold to pull a calf for a cow that will not even thank him. That was the language, and Dylan was fluent in it. So was I. Between us, we kept the place alive through years that broke better outfits than ours. I hold on to that. Most of what I have left to tell puts him in ground I never even found to bury him in, and that cannot be the only way I remember him. Jean was my wife. She came off a wheat family 2 counties over. I met her at a bull sale, of all the romantic places. She married me knowing exactly what she was getting, which was a quiet man, a mortgage, and a wind that never quits. We had no children. That was a sorrow in the house, one we had learned to carry without setting it down in the middle of the floor every day. I will leave it there. It is hers as much as mine. She is still living, and I am not going to spend her grief in a story. Jean ran the books and the garden, and half the cattle work besides. She was tougher than I was in the ways that count. When it came, she was the one who kept her head. Folks always figure the woman is the one who comes apart, and the man is the one who holds them all together. With us, it ran the other way, more often than not. The year matters to how slow I was. 1974 was the year the cattle market fell out from under every man who ran cows in that country. The business is simple enough at the bottom of it. In the spring, a steer was worth a certain thing. By the fall, he was worth about half of that, and the feed to carry him through winter cost more than he would ever bring. So a man was feeding a $100 bill to make a $50 bill. Everybody knew it. Everybody did it anyway, because the only other choice was to sell into a market that had already broken his back and call himself finished. Men I had known my whole life were finished that year, and would not say so. The Collie Cafe went quiet in a way I had not heard before. A man could sit at that counter with 4 ranchers along it, and not one of them talking, all of them looking down into their coffee, running arithmetic that did not add. The waitress learned not to try to jolly anybody up. Every week the back of the Pell County paper carried foreclosure notices in small print, names a man knew off the mailboxes. It was a bad time to be a cattleman. That is why I was slow. When my cattle started dying, I did not think alien, I did not think government, and I did not think evil. I thought money. My first honest thought, at the front edge of the worst thing that ever happened to a family in that county, was what it was going to cost me. That is the kind of year it was. Our neighbor to the north was Gus Sattler. Gus is going to matter. The Sattlers had been on the flat almost as long as the Harlans. Gus was past 80 that fall, a widower, living alone on his home place with a hired man who came in days. He was one of those old high plains men who go hard and dry and small like a stick of jerky, and after that do not seem to age any further, because there is nothing left in them to age. He had buried a wife, a son, and most of his friends. He ran a few cows out of stubbornness more than money. His Ford was so old the paint had gone to primer and chalk. When he passed a man on the county road, he raised one finger off the wheel. That was the High Plains wave, the whole of the affection some of those old men had left to give, and it was plenty. Gus had known my grandfather. He was old enough to have known Josiah Harlan as a grown man back when Gus himself was a boy. That turned out to be the most important thing about him. I did not know it mattered until it was far too late for the knowing to save anybody. I could walk that place in the dark. By the end of that fall, I more or less had to. Harlan Flats ran to about 4,000 deeded acres with a state lease on top. Sounds like a lot until a man learns it takes 25 or 30 acres of that short brown grass to carry one cow through the year out there. It was never as much as it sounded. The main house sat up on the rise, white, 2 stories. The porch turned east, away from the worst of the wind. My grandfather had planted a windbreak of Chinese elms that never got tall, because nothing gets tall out there. Below the house lay the yard. The calving barn, the machine shed, the corrals of pipe and cable, a set of steel bins, the bunkhouse where Dylan lived, because he liked his own space, and I did not blame him. In the middle of the yard stood a pole with a mercury light on it. It came on by itself at dusk and buzzed all night, and threw a hard blue circle down on the packed dirt. Moths came to it in summer. In winter it lit the snow. I had never once in my life thought about that light except to be glad it was there. A man does not think about the light he has always had until the night it goes out. The land ran away from the house in every direction. That is why they called it the Flats, though flat out there is a lie people from elsewhere believe. It is not flat. It rolls, long and slow, in swells like the ocean has when there is no wind. There are draws and sinks and blowouts hidden in it that a man cannot see until he is right on top of them. The north end of my ground was the worst of it that way. We called it the North Quarter, though it ran to more than a quarter section. Low ground. A wide, shallow sink where a dry creek we called the draw came down out of the swells, spread out and quit, just sank into the dirt and went nowhere. Alkali came up white down there in the dry times. The grass grew coarse and blue-green, a color that never looked right to me. Cattle liked it fine in a wet year. There was good shelter in the draw when the blizzards came down out of the north. My grandfather never ran cattle in the north quarter after dark. Nobody enforced it. Nobody told it as a story. It was just a thing my father did, that his father had done before him. The north quarter got worked in daylight. In the fall, the cattle got pushed up out of it toward the home place before dark, every fall. If a man asked why, and I did ask why, once, when I was maybe 12, my father said the ground was bad down there and let it go at that, bad ground. I took it to mean the alkali, or the bogging in the draw, or the way a cow could get down in a blowout and never get up. There are 100 plain reasons a piece of ground is bad, and every one of them is duller than the truth. I believed all 100 of them for 38 years, rather than the one, because the one was not a thing a sane man believed. So we pushed the cattle up out of the north quarter before dark in the fall, a habit whose start nobody living remembered. I thought I did it because of boggy ground. I kept doing it right up until the fall it stopped working. Then I found out what my grandfather had been afraid of. By then it had already started on the cattle, and it does not stop once it has started. It started with a dead heifer on the last day of September. Dylan found her. He had gone down to the north quarter that morning to check the water and count pairs. Ordinary work, the kind one of us did most days without thinking twice. He came back up to the yard driving faster than a man drives a ranch road for no reason. I was greasing the swather in front of the machine shed. I stood up when I heard him coming. A man learns the sound of his own vehicles. He learns when one of them is being pushed. Dylan slid the truck in and got out with a look on him I had not seen since our father died. Not scared. Dylan did not scare easy, just wrong. The look of a man who has run the numbers and does not trust the answer. "Come look at this," he said. "I don't know what I'm looking at." We went down together in my truck. Clear, cool morning. That hard, high plains blew overhead, a little frost still holding in the shadows of the swells where the sun had not reached. The north quarter opens up as the road comes down off the last rise. The whole shallow bowl of it lay out in front of us, the draw cutting a pale seam through the middle. I could see the cattle scattered where they ought to be, grazing, tails going, and I could see the one that was not grazing. She was down in the open, maybe 100 yards short of the draw, on her side. Even from up on the rise, I could tell by the stillness of her that she was neither sleeping nor sick. A sick cow gets up when a truck comes. A dead cow lies there. She was one of my good young ones. A black baldy, 2 years old, would have calved in the spring. She lay on her left side with her legs straight out, not curled the way an animal curls when it dies hard. Nothing said she had fought or run. The grass around her was not torn. There were no tracks. That was the first thing Dylan had seen, and the first thing that put the wrong look on his face, and once I was down out of the truck and standing over her, I saw it too. 2 days of dew and frost had come and gone. The ground around that heifer was clean. No coyote pad, no boot, no tire, nothing. Just her, dropped in the middle of open grass like she had come down out of the sky. And she had been cut. There was a hole in her, low on the belly and back toward the flank, where an animal keeps the parts I am not going to make a list of. The hole was round, not ragged. Round and clean, about the size of a coffee can. The edge of it was dark and smooth, like a piece of leather somebody had put a hot iron to. Whatever had been behind that hole was gone, taken, and there was not one drop of blood. Not in the hole, not on her hide, not on the grass beneath her. A cow carries a lot of blood. I have butchered enough of them to know exactly how much. I have seen what coyotes and dogs leave, and what a bad calving leaves, and it is a mess every time, because blood is a mess. That is what blood does. There was no mess here. She had been opened up and emptied out with less blood on the ground than I get on my hands wringing a chicken's neck. Her udder was gone the same way. Cut out clean, a round hole, the edges sealed dark. One ear was gone, the hide, where it had been trimmed off in a smooth curve, like a tailor had done it, and one eye had been taken. Not pecked, not rotted, not the way magpies get at a carcass. Taken clean, and the socket under it was dry and dark and closed over at the rim, the same as everything else. Cauterized. sealed shut by a heat I could not find, because when I made myself put a bare hand flat on her side, she was stone cold. Cold as the ground, cold as the morning. Dylan stood on the far side of her with his hands in his jacket pockets. "What in the hell did that?" he said, real quiet. I had no answer, and I did not pretend to. I walked around her twice, slow, the way a man walks around a thing he cannot make sense of, looking for the story in the ground. There is always a story in the ground. A dead animal is a page a man can read if he knows the country. Where did it come from? What came to it? And which way did it go? I read that page every day of my life. This one was blank. Worse than blank. It had been wiped. The only tracks in that whole stretch were ours coming in, and hers from the day before, and hers stopped a good ways off from where she lay, as if she had been set down in a place she never walked to. My first thought, once I got past the sick jolt of it, was people. That is the honest thing, and I will own it. In '74 there was talk in that country, the way there gets to be talk, about cattle turning up cut just this way, over in the next tier of counties, up across the state line. It had been in the papers a little and on the radio more. Every theory a man heard was a human one, because those are the only kind a rancher has any use for. Cults, that was the big one. Somebody said devil worshippers were doing it, cutting up stock in the dark for a purpose nobody could name, and everybody half believed it and half laughed at it. Thieves was another. People taking glands or organs to sell, though nobody could say to who or for what. The brand inspector liked the dullest theory of all, which was coyotes and blowflies and rot and scared ranchers with too much time seeing butchery in an ordinary dead cow. I wanted it to be people. I stood over that heifer, and what I hoped for, what I actually hoped for, was that some sick son of a bitch with a truck and a sharp knife had come onto my place in the night. A man with a knife I can understand. A man with a knife I can shoot or fence out or hand to the sheriff. A man with a knife leaves tracks. Their being gone only meant he was careful, or the wind had taken them, or I was not reading the ground as well as I thought. I built that whole story standing there and believed as much of it as I could stand to. It lasted about as long as it took Doc Farley to get out from town. I called him from the house. Doc Farley was the large animal vet and collie, had been for 30 years. A heavy, calm man who had put his arm inside more cows than any living person in Pell County, and was not troubled by much. I told him what we had. "Keep everybody off it and don't move her," he said, "and I'll come." He came inside the hour, which for Doc in the fall was a small miracle. It told me the talk had gotten to him too, that he had been waiting for one of these to land on a place he trusted. He spent a long time with that heifer, longer than I expected. He got down on his knees in the grass with his bag, working her up the way he would any case, and Dylan and I stood back and let him. The wind came up toward midday and moved the grass and moved nothing else. When Doc finally sat back on his heels, he did a thing I had never seen him do. He took his glasses off, pinched the top of his nose, and sat there a second with his eyes shut. A man with a headache coming on. A man saying a short prayer. Then he put the glasses back and looked up at me. "There is no blood," he said. "You saw that." I saw it. "An animal this size," he said. "You cut her like this. Alive or dead, fresh or not, you get blood. A great deal of it. The heart stops, but the blood stays. It pools, it settles, it comes out when you open the low side. He is on the low side. There ought to be a lake of it under her, and there is not a spoonful. And these edges." He touched the rim of the belly wound with one gloved finger, not going in. "This is cauterized. Heat did it. High heat, fast. And it did it without so much as scorching the hair around the cut. I cannot do that. Nobody I know of can. Not with a knife, not with a torch, not with the thing I carry in that truck. Coyotes," I said. Somebody had to say it. Doc looked at me. "No coyote in the world takes an eye and an ear and leaves the tongue." Then he stopped. He reached up under the jaw with 2 fingers, gentle, worked the heifer's mouth open a little, looked, and shut it again. "The tongue's gone, too," he said. "Cut out at the root. Clean." He wiped his hands slow on a rag. "No coyote does surgery, Travis. No lightning, no blackleg, no bloat. I have seen every ugly way a cow can die in this county for 30 years, and I have never seen this. I will tell you what I can prove, and no more. What I can prove is that somebody or something took the soft parts out of this animal with more skill and less mess than I could manage in my own operating room. Did it without spilling a drop, left no track. And I do not have the next sentence for you. I purely do not. That was Doc Farley, who did not run out of sentences. It scared me a little worse than the heifer did, that he had run out. He took samples, small squares of the sealed hide cut from around the wounds into jars, a vial of what little fluid he could find, a bag of the soil from under her. He wrote it up in his book. He would send what he could to the state lab and to the university if the state would not take it. Don't expect much, he said. Then he told me the thing I have chewed on 1,000 times since, because it was the closest anyone came, that early, to the truth. He said it as a joke, the way a man jokes to get a bad taste out of his mouth. He was packing his bag. He looked out across the north quarter at the draw and the swells and that big empty sky coming down on all of it. You know, the old-timers used to say there was ground out here you didn't graze after dark. He shook his head and laughed a little through his nose. My granddad talked like that. Star country, he called some of these low draws. Wouldn't run a horse through one after sundown for love or money. He latched the bag. Bunch of foolishness. But I'll tell you, Travis, standing here, I don't hate the sound of it the way I used to. Star country. I did not know what he meant, and I did not ask. I did not want to know, and Gus Sadler was going to tell me soon enough. And a man only has so much room in one day for things he cannot explain. I helped Doc load his bag. I told him I would drag the heifer up out of the quarter and burn her, which is what a man does. He told me not to burn her yet. Leave her a day or two, in case the state wanted to look, and keep the other cattle back if I could. Then he drove out. His taillights went up over the rise and were gone. It was just Dillon and me, 40-some head of cattle, and one dead one in the bottom of the north quarter, with the afternoon getting on. I should have listened to the dog. Dillon had a red heeler named Boone, an old one, 6 or 7 years, going gray in the muzzle. A good cattle dog that had spent his whole life in the bed of a pickup and on the heels of stock and would go anywhere Dillon went without being asked. Boone had ridden down with us both times that day. Both times he would not get out of the truck. I did not clock it the first trip. A dog does what a dog does, and I had a dead heifer on my mind. But the second time, when we came down with Doc, Dillon opened his door, and Boone did not pour out over him the way he always did. The dog stayed on the seat. He stood up on it with his feet braced, looking out the windshield down at the north quarter, and made a sound I had heard maybe twice in his whole life. A low sound, way down in his chest. Not a growl and not a whine, something underneath both. His hackles stood in a ridge from his neck, clear back to his hips. "Boone, come on," Dillon said, and slapped his leg. The dog looked at him. Actually, looked at him, at Dillon, his own person, with a face I can only call an apology, and would not come, would not put a foot on that ground. Dillon shut the door and left him in the cab, and made a joke about the dog getting old and soft. I laughed. We went and stood over the heifer. The whole time, Boone sat up in that truck and watched us, and watched past us, out at the draw, and did not quit that sound in his chest until we drove back up out of the bottom. Animals know things first. Every stockman knows that much, and figures he knows what it is worth, which is not much, because a cow will spook at a plastic bag, and a horse will lose its mind over a garden hose it is decided is a snake. So I filed Boone under a dog gone shy of a carcass. That happens. Dogs do not always like a dead thing. That is what I told myself. I told myself a great many reasonable things that fall. Every one of them was reasonable. Every one of them was wrong. The difference between me and my grandfather was that he had believed the unreasonable thing in time to be afraid of it. I had to be taught. That night the dog would not stay outside. Boone had slept in the bed of the truck or on the bunkhouse porch every night of his life. Dillon said he scratched at the bunkhouse door until he let him in, and then would not settle. Went window to window in the dark, nails ticking on the floor. Finally he lay down against the north wall of the bunkhouse, the wall that faced the quarter, pressed right up to it, and stayed there awake until morning. Dylan told it at breakfast like it was funny. "Damn dog thinks there's a bear," he said. Jean poured the coffee. Out the kitchen window, the north quarter lay quiet and gold in the early light, one dead animal in the bottom of it that the state and the university never did come to see. I ate my eggs. I did not yet understand that my grandfather's whole life had been built around keeping that thing asleep, and that we had just fed it. The second one came 8 days later. Same ground. A dry cow this time, an older one, found in the morning by Dylan again, because Dylan worked the north end, down near the mouth of the draw where the shelter was. Same clean round bore low in the flank. Same sealed, dark edges. Same nothing on the ground beneath her. This one had lost the flesh off one side of the jaw, stripped down to white bone and a clean oval. The bone was polished. The lips were gone on that side, so her teeth stood out and made her look like she was grinning at the sky. No blood, no tracks. A cow her size runs better than 1,000 pounds, and something had rolled her from the side she died on to lay bare the low cuts. There was no drag, no gouge, no sign of the 4 or 5 men and the winch it would have taken Dylan and me to move her. I stood over that second cow a long time. Dylan stood with me. Neither of us said much. The wind came across the grass. Off somewhere a meadowlark was going at it, like nothing in the world was wrong, and there is no lonelier sound than a bird singing over a thing like that. I ran the arithmetic. I keep running. 2 head, 8 days apart, both in the north quarter, both clean, both bled dry, both untracked. 2 is not 1. 1 is bad luck or a sick joke. 2 is a pattern. A pattern means something is choosing, and the thing that chooses has a reason, and I did not have the first idea what the reason could be. Standing there in the sun with that grinning cow at my feet was the first time I felt the real thing. The cold that comes up out of the ground into a man when the world quits making the kind of sense he has always been able to count on. The night the truck died is the one that should have taught me. I read it exactly wrong. It was the evening after we found the second cow. The first heifer was getting to be a problem, going bad in the warm afternoons, drawing birds. The state had never come and never would. I decided to at least drag her up out of the bottom and burn her before she fouled the whole quarter. So I went down alone at dusk in the old '68 Ford with a chain in the bed, the good work truck, a truck that started on the first turn of the key in January at 20 below. A truck I trusted the way a man trusts a thing that has never once let him down. I got down into the bottom, backed around to get the chain on her, and shut the truck off to save fuel while I worked, a thing I had done 10,000 times. When I was done, I climbed back in and turned the key. Nothing. Not a click. Not a groan out of the starter. The dash lights did not even come up. Dead, as if I had pulled the battery out and set it in the grass. A dead truck is an ordinary trouble, and I treated it like one. Popped the hood, checked the terminals by the last of the light, thinking corrosion, thinking a cable had shaken loose on the washboard. Everything was tight and clean. I got back in and tried again. Same nothing. The CB under the dash ran off that same battery, and it was dead too, no power light. I keyed it, and there was not even the hiss of an open channel, just dead air with no bottom to it. I sat there in the dark cab in the bottom of the north quarter, and my skin was crawling, and I did not know why. A dead battery does not crawl a man's skin. Some animal part of me had worked out a thing my front brain had not. I looked at my watch. My father had left me a good wind-up watch that kept fine time. The second hand was not moving. I held it to my ear. Nothing. I did the sensible thing. I left the truck and walked up out of the bottom toward the yard light, because a man does not sit in the dead truck in the dark 1.5 miles from his own bed. And as I came up over the first swell, something happened that I did not understand that night, and understand too well now. The watch started ticking again. I had it up near my face, walking, watching my footing, and I heard it. Playing. That little sound against my ear. Tick. I stopped and looked. The second hand was going around like it had never quit. I stood there on the swell in the last of the light with my father's watch running in my hand. The truck sat dead in the bottom below me. The yard light was coming on above me, a hard little blue star a mile off. The hair went up on the back of my neck. A dead man's watch, I told myself. Cheap movement. It hangs up sometimes. And I walked on home. In the morning I drove the other truck down and it started fine. I put a jump box on the dead Ford and it turned over on the first try, like there had never been a thing wrong with it. Ran perfect all the way up to the yard. I put the whole business down to a ground fault, a loose wire somewhere that had shaken back into place, one of the 100 gremlins an old truck grows. I never once put the truck and the watch together with the cattle. Why would I? A man builds his understanding of the world out of the parts that have always fit. There was no shelf in my head for a piece of ground that killed batteries and stopped time. So I threw the piece away, the way a man throws away a part that came in the box and matches nothing, and I went on. That is the rule I was handed and did not read. When it was working a piece of ground, nothing electrical would run inside a circle around it. Engines died, batteries went flat and came back. Watches stopped and started again at the edge of it. Learned that in September, and it would have saved my brother's life in November. The dead engine was not the trouble. The dead engine was the warning. It was the edge of the thing, drawn on the world in a language I could have learned. I did not learn it. I held it in my hand, ticking, called it a cheap movement, and walked home. The rings came next, and the rings are what made me get the camera. We started finding them once we knew to look. Where an animal had been taken, there was a place on the ground, and the place was a circle. Inside the circle, the grass lay pressed flat and turned over in a curl. All of it swept the same way, clockwise, swirled down like water going out of a sink, 25, 30 feet across. The edge of it was sharp. A clean line where the flat grass stopped and the standing grass began, no gradual thing, an edge a man could have followed with his boot. Inside the ring, the ground had changed. Dried out, hard, the color gone pale. Here and there it was scorched, little patches burned down to bare dirt, with the grass roots cooked white. Nothing crossed those patches. No ant, no bug. Dead grasshoppers lay scattered around the rim on their backs. And there was the smell. The smell in those rings stayed with me longest. Like a box of kitchen matches all struck at once, that sharp sulfur bite, and under it something clean and cold and chemical. A hospital smell, the room where Doc kept his instruments. It hung in that pressed grass for days, in the dead calm, long past when any smell should have quit. When the wind finally scoured it out, a man could still find it if he got down on his knees and put his face in the flattened grass. Faint, waiting, like it had soaked into the ground. Jean had a Polaroid camera, the kind that spat the picture out the front, and let a man watch it come up slow out of the gray. I took to carrying it down to the north quarter in the truck. I photographed everything. The cattle, the wounds up close with my pocket knife laid in the frame for size, the rings, the scorched patches, the dead grasshoppers, the pressed grass with its curl. I did it because Doc had said to document, and because some hard, cold part of me had started keeping a record without asking the rest of me why. I built up a stack of those little white frame pictures and kept them in a coffee can on a shelf in the machine shed. Later I kept them somewhere better. Later still, men came and took them. The sheriff was no help, and I do not entirely blame him. His name was Ward. A big, soft-spoken man with the whole of Pell County to cover, 2 deputies, and a budget that was a joke. He came out after the second cow because I called and asked him to. He walked the north quarter with me in his town boots and looked at what there was to look at, which, from his side, was not much. A dead cow with some cuts on her. No body. No suspect. No tracks. No tire. No shell casing. Nothing. I showed him the ring and the scorched ground. He stood in it and frowned and said the wind did funny things out here, which is true, the wind does. I showed him the sealed wounds, and he allowed they were like nothing he had seen, but said he was not a vet. I told him about the talk, the other places getting hit up north. He got a tired look. Yes, he said. He had heard from other sheriffs. There was a rash of it. The state brand board was looking into it and figured it for a cult or a hoax or predators and picky reporters. And so far, nobody anywhere had one shred of hard evidence of a human being doing any of it. No tracks, no tools, no witness, nothing a man could carry to a judge. So, what do? I said. I've lost 2 head in 10 days, and something is coming onto my place in the dark. Ward looked at me. Not unkind. Travis, I'll write it up. I'll take your pictures and flag it with the brand inspector. But I'm going to be straight with you, 'cause you're a straight man and you've got it coming. There's not a thing here I can chase. If it's men, they're better at leaving no sign than anybody I ever heard of. And if it's not men, it's not my department, and I don't know whose it is. He looked out across the quarter with the same look Doc had. Keep your stock up close to the buildings. Get a good dog. Sit up nights if you've a mind to. If you catch somebody on your place doing this, you're within your rights, and you call me and not the Undertaker, you understand? That was the sheriff of Pell County, doing his honest best, and it came to nothing, because the thing on my place was no more in his book than it was in mine. I went into Collie for parts that week, and I found out what it is to be the man the county is talking about. Collie was not much. A grain elevator, a co-op, the cafe, a bar called the Sundown, a church, 2 streets of houses. Everybody knew everybody's business, because there was not enough business to go around. I needed fence clips and a battery for the dead Ford, so I went to the co-op, and the second I came through the door I felt it. The talk did not stop dead the way a man half expects it to. It just changed. It got a beat too careful. Earl behind the counter was friendly the way a man is friendly when he has been saying your name all morning and does not want you to know it. He rang up my clips and asked after Jean, and did not ask the thing everybody in that store wanted to ask, which was whether it was true about the Harlan cattle, and how many and what really did it. Bud Cade was there, leaning on the far end of the counter with a sack of mineral on his shoulder. Bud ran cows south of me, a good hand, a serious man. He waited until Earl was making my change, and then he came down the counter. Quiet, and he said, "Low, so it stayed between us. You losing stock, Travis?" And I said I was. He nodded. He looked out the front window a second. "I lost 2, he said, "last month. Same as what they're saying. No blood." He did not look at me when he said it. Cut clean. I burned them before anybody came out. And I have thought a lot since about the way he said that. I burned them before anybody came out, because it was not a man reporting a loss. It was a man confessing that he had gotten rid of the evidence of his own before the talk could land on him the way it had landed on me. He had done the smart thing. He had kept his head down. And here I was, the fool who had called the sheriff and let the vet take samples, and stood in the co-op with the whole county wondering if I had gone soft. "You tell the sheriff," Bud said. It was not really a question. I told him. Bud was quiet. Then he said the thing that most of them were too polite to say, and he said it kindly, which was worse. "Careful how loud you say it, is all." He shifted the mineral sack. Man starts talking about lights and no blood. Folks quit lending him their loader. He gave me a nod and went out to his truck, and he was not wrong. And we both knew he was not wrong, and I stood there with my fence clips, understanding that I had a choice coming. I could keep the truth and lose the county, or keep the county and bury the truth, the way Bud had burned his 2 cows before anybody came out. The way I would learn my grandfather had done it for the last 30 years of his life. I stopped at the cafe for coffee I did not want, because turning around and driving straight home felt like running. Faye had the counter. She poured me a cup and was decent about it, but there were 2 men in the corner booth I had known since grade school, and they went quiet when I sat down, and one of them, a fellow who had never in his life had an unkind thought he did not share, said, loud enough to carry, "Hey, Travis, you get them spacemen off your place yet?" and laughed. And the other one laughed. And it was not cruel exactly. It was the way men in a hard year laugh at the one thing that has gotten stranger than the market. I drank my coffee. I did not laugh with them, and I did not tell them to go to hell. There was an old man at the end of the counter, older than Gus even, a retired rancher named Wick that I half knew, and while those two were laughing, he looked at me down the length of the counter. He did not laugh. He looked at me the way a man looks at somebody who has caught a thing that is going around, something a man would not wish on anybody and cannot do a thing about. And then he put a quarter by his cup and got up and left without a word. That look stayed with me longer than the laughing did. There were men in that county who knew. Not many, and none of them young, and not one of them was ever going to say it out loud in the Collie Cafe, but they knew. And old Wick leaving his coffee was the first time I understood that I had walked into a thing the county had agreed, a long time ago, to laugh at instead of look at. I drove home with my fence clips and my new battery. The whole way out on the county road I did the arithmetic Bud Cade had set going in me. Burn them before anybody comes out. Keep your head down. Do not be the man who says lights out loud. Every rancher on that road who had ever lost a cow the clean way had come to the same answer. Quiet, alone, and the answer was silence. And the silence was so complete that a man could live his whole life on Harlan Flats, as I had, and never once know that the neighbors 3 miles off had buried the same nightmare in the same shallow grave. That is how a thing like that keeps. Not with a conspiracy, with a whole county full of proud broke men who would each rather burn their own 2 cows in the dark than be the one who stood up in the cafe and said the word. We started sitting up nights. That was the rational thing, and it still looks rational to me. Everything my brother and I did that fall we did for good reasons, out of the facts we had. As far as we knew, somebody or something was coming onto the north end of the place in the dark and killing my cattle, and a rancher whose stock is being killed sits up with a rifle. There was nothing green or foolish in it. That was just a Tuesday, out where we were. Men in that country had sat up over calving heifers and coyote trouble and rustlers since there had been men in that country. My grandfather's 30-30 hung over the kitchen door where it had hung my whole life. I took it down, cleaned it, loaded it. Dylan had his own rifle, a bolt-action deer gun, a 30-06 with a scope. We made a plan the way a man makes a plan for coyotes. Keep the cattle bunched close to the home place, out of the north quarter entirely. Take turns, one up and watching while the other slept. If we saw headlights or a man or anything at all moving on that ground in the dark, we would go down together, armed and careful, and find out who the hell was killing my cows. It was a good plan. It was the plan any 2 ranchers would have made. It had exactly one flaw in it. It was built for men. The thing that was coming was not men, and every part of the plan that would have worked fine against a man in a truck was worse than useless against what actually came. The 3rd cow taught us not to go down there in the dark. It came close to teaching us a great deal worse. We were about a week into sitting up, and we had a system by then. One of us took the kitchen with a rifle and the north windows. The other slept. We traded it too. Tiresome work, and it felt like foolishness. Night after night of staring out at a black yard and a blacker slope, waiting for a truck that never came. I had the early watch. The wind had blown hard all evening. A little after midnight it fell off, quit between one gust and the next, and the quiet that came down behind it put the hair up on my arms. I went and woke Dylan early. I did not want to be the only one awake on a still night. We sat in the dark kitchen with the coffee going cold and the rifles across our knees and watched the north. Boone started it. Dylan still had him then. The dog had been asleep under the kitchen table, and he came up out of it all at once with a growl already in him. He went to the north door and stood with his nose to the crack, every hair on him standing. Then the cattle in the near corral began to move. We could hear them, the shift and press of them, A low, nervous rumble, all of them working to the south rail the way they had the first time, away from the low ground. And down in the north quarter, past where the yard light reached, there was something. Not the light, not the way it came later. Nothing I could point at and name. A wrongness in the dark down there. The black knot sitting right over that bottom. Maybe the faintest paleness along the lip of the draw. Gone when I looked straight at it, back when I looked away. Dylan was up and into his coat before I said a word. "Rustlers," he said, and his voice was hard and glad. Glad to have a thing to do with his hands at last. "They're down there right now, Travis." Come on. And it made sense. Everything in me that thinks the way a man is supposed to think said he was right. Whoever had been cutting my cattle was down in that bottom this minute with a truck and a knife, and if we moved fast and came at them from the high side, we would have them. I wanted them. I wanted somebody down there I could point a rifle at. So we went, took my truck and both rifles, ran dark down the ranch road with the headlights off until we were off the rise. I remember Dylan beside me with his window down and his rifle up, hunting. I remember thinking we had them. The truck died at the lip of the bottom. Same as before. No sputter, no warning. The engine and the lights and the whole thing gone dark at once. We coasted to a stop in the grass at the top edge of the quarter. The dark closed in. It went quiet. That deep quiet. The engine ticked as it cooled, and then even that seemed to get sucked down and away. I sat with my hands on the dead wheel and felt the wrongness of it. Dylan already had his door open. He was out. Going down on foot after the rustlers, because to Dylan a dead truck meant they had cut a wire or the cold had got the battery. An ordinary trouble. He was not going to let them get away over a dead battery. "Dylan," I said, and it came out of me low and not like my own voice. "Come on," he said. "They're right down there." He took a few steps into the bottom. And I could not follow him, and I could not have said why, and I opened my mouth to call him back, and the cold hit me. It came up the slope, out of the bottom, like a slow wave, that cold with the edge on it, the cold that has nothing to do with the weather. It came up over me where I stood by the truck, and my breath quit smoking. The smell came with it, the struck matches and the clean hospital under it. Faint but there, rising out of the dark where my brother was walking. Then the silence closed over everything. I called Dylan's name and the sound died in front of my face. I could see him, a shape going down into the black maybe 30 yards ahead. I went after him, not brave, just unable to stand and watch him go. I got a hold of his coat from behind and hauled on it with everything I had. He turned. Even in the dark I could see something had gone slack and easy in his face. The front edge of the thing I would see full on the last night. I got both hands in his coat and dragged him back up the slope. He came. Thank God, he came. He did not fight me. The higher we got, the more of him came back, until near the top he was himself again, shaking, saying, "What the hell, Travis? What the hell was that?" over and over. We did not drive out. The truck was dead, and we were not going to stand in that bottom waiting to see if it would start. We went up the ranch road, on foot, fast, not running, but not far off it. Neither of us looked behind us. About halfway up the long slope, the world came back the way it does, all at once, the little wind and the night sounds and the sky full of stars. We walked into the yard under the buzzing blue light and stood there, breathing hard, alive. No rustlers, no answers, and a truck sitting dead a mile below us in the dark. The time was wrong when we got in. I have never been able to work that out, and I have stopped trying. We had left the house a little after midnight. I was sure of it. I had looked at the clock on my way out the door. We were not down in that bottom more than a few minutes. I would have sworn to that. The walk down, the cold, hauling Dylan back. The walk up, 20 minutes, half an hour at the outside. The kitchen clock said it was going on 3. When I checked it against my father's watch, the two did not agree, and I could not get them to agree. In the end, I set the watch by the clock and said nothing about it out loud, because Dylan was rattled enough, and so was I. And there are things a man does not say at 3 in the morning to his brother when both of them already know that something down in that bottom had eaten a piece of the night, and neither of them can find it. There was a cow dead in the bottom in the morning. We found her when we went down at first light for the truck, which started for me on the first turn of the key, like it always did. She was down near where the truck had died, inside a fresh ring of pressed and scorched grass, cut and bled, white and sealed. I stood over her and understood, all the way down, that the thing had been working that spot in the dark last night while my brother walked toward it. That it had been right there, close, taking this cow apart in the silence, and that it had let us go, let us walk back up the hill. I did not know whether that was mercy or patience. I have never known since. I think it was patience, because a patient thing does not need to take a man the first night it could. It has all the time there is. It knows he will be back. We did not go down there in the dark again after that. Not once. Not for anything. Not until the night the cattle went through the fence and the choice was taken away from us. We had learned the one lesson it would teach us for free, which was that a man does not walk toward the thing in that bottom. We said it out loud to each other, standing over that third cow in the cold morning light like a promise. And we kept it, right up until the herd broke and running down that slope became the only thing in the world a stockman's body knew how to do. We kept it until keeping it meant watching everything we owned pour down into the dark. Then we broke it, and it cost me my brother. I have wondered ever since whether the thing knew that too. Whether it knew that the surest way to get two men who had learned to stay off that ground was to send their whole living down into it ahead of them. I do not credit it with that much. But I do not rule it out either, and that is most of what I have left of that fall. The things about it I cannot rule out. Gus Sattler came over the day after the fourth cow. By then we had lost 4 head in 3 weeks, all in the North Quarter, all the same clean, bloodless way. The word had gotten around the county the way word does, at the co-op and the cafe, and over the party line, and I had stopped being able to tell which of my neighbors thought I had a rustler, and which thought I had lost my mind. Gus was not one for visiting. In 20 years I do not think he had been up to my house more than a handful of times. Weddings and funerals, the times a man goes. So when his chalky old Ford came up the drive in the middle of a workday, I knew it was not neighboring. I met him in the yard. He did not get out at first. He sat with the engine running and looked at me through the windshield. Then he shut it off and got out slow, an old man unfolding himself, and he did not say hello. He said, "How many?" "4." I told him. He nodded, like that was a number he had been dreading. "Show me." I took him down to the North Quarter in my truck. He did not talk on the way. He sat with his hands on his knees and looked out at the country he had looked at for 80 years. When we came down off the rise and to the bottom, his hands closed on his knees. I saw them close. "Pull up here," he said, well short of where the fourth cow lay. He got out and stood by the truck and would not go closer. He looked at the dead cow from 50 yards. He looked at the ring around her, the pressed grass, the scorched ground. He turned a slow circle and took in the whole bottom, the draw, the alkali, the coarse blue grass. His old face had gone a color I did not like, gray under the weather brown. When he spoke, his voice had changed. "Your granddad find these," he said. It was not quite a question. "My granddad's been dead 30 years, Gus." "I know when Josiah died," he said, sharp, the first sharp thing out of him. I carried him. "I mean, did your granddad ever find one of these on this ground when you were a boy? Did your daddy?" "Not that I ever heard," I said. "Why?" Gus was quiet a while. The wind moved the grass. Then he said, "The thing I have turned over every night for the rest of that fall, and turn over still. That's because they kept the cattle off this ground after dark, boy. Every fall, you know that. You do it yourself." He looked at me. "You do it, don't you? You push them up out of here before dark." "I did," I told him. "Out of habit. My dad always did." He said the ground was bad. Gus made a sound that was not a laugh. "Bad ground. That's what Josiah told me too, when I was young enough to ask. Same as you asked, I expect." He looked at the draw. The light was getting long and gold, the afternoon starting to tip toward evening, and I saw him check the west the way an old man checks weather. Except he was not checking weather. "Get me back up to the house before this light goes," he said. "I'll tell you what I can, but I want off this ground before dark. And if you've got the sense God gave a post, you'll want off it too." We sat on my porch as the sun went down, and Gus Sadler told me what he would tell me, which was not everything. I did not learn until much later how much he was holding back. I have made my peace with it, because a man does not hand another man the worst thing he knows unless he has to, and Gus was still hoping, that evening, that I would not have to know it. "It's not people," he said. "First thing, put that out of your head, or you'll waste what time you've got sitting up nights waiting for a truck that never comes." He turned his hat in his hands. "I've seen this before. Once. I was a boy, younger than Dylan, out on the far end of our place. We lost stock like this, cut like this, no blood, no tracks. And my father did what you're doing. He sat up with a rifle. I want to tell you what he learned, because he paid for it, and there's no reason you should pay for it twice." I did not say anything. The yard light came on behind us with its little buzz. Gus glanced at it and went on. "It comes on the still nights, not the storms. People always figure the bad thing rides in with the storm. This comes when the wind lays down and the sky goes clear and hard and it turns cold. The pretty nights. The ones where you can see every star God ever hung. Those are its nights. When the weather's like that, you stay in. You keep your people in, and you keep your stock as far from that low ground as you can get them, and you wait for morning. Whatever it is, it's gone by morning. It don't like the day." He turned the hat. "It works a piece of ground. Takes what it takes. Then it moves. Leave it be. Don't feed it and don't fight it, and it'll work your north quarter and lose interest and drift off. Maybe onto me. Maybe out into the empty, where there's no stock at all. That's what my father figured. Too late to help us, and in time to help the next fellow. You leave it alone. You let it have the ground. You do not go down there after it." "Why not?" I said. "I had to. 4 dead cows, Gus. I can't sit on my porch and let it kill my whole herd." Gus looked at me with something in his face. I did not have a name for then and do now. Grief. Old grief, the kind that has had 60 years to set up hard as concrete. Because of what it does to a man who goes down there. Your truck won't run in that bottom when it's working, will it? He watched me. I saw it land on you when I said it. It won't. Nothing electric will. My father's flashlight died in his hand. A man walks down into that on his own 2 feet, in the dark, with his rifle, thinking he'll catch something, and he comes back wrong. If he comes back. My father came back. He was never the whole of himself again. Lost time down there he never got back, hours he couldn't account for. Had a mark on him he wouldn't show my mother. Woke up nights the rest of his life with his mouth open and no sound coming out. That's the best case, boy. That's the man who comes back. There is a worse case, and I buried enough of it to know. I sat with that. Down below the house, the north quarter had gone blue, then black, as the light left it. I could not see the draw anymore, and I did not like that I could not. "You said leave it alone and it moves on," I said. "What if it don't? What if it takes a liking to the place?" "Then you sell and you go," Gus said, flat. "Take your wife and your brother and go. Let the bank have it. Start over somewhere with no low ground." He put his hat on. "That's what I'd tell my own son, if I still had one to tell. But there's one thing past that. One thing you have to hear, and then I'm going home before it's full dark." He stood up off the porch chair, an old man's careful rising, and looked down at me. "This is the part I have never been able to forget. So far it's only cattle," he said. "As long as it's only cattle, you've got room to be smart. But if it ever takes a person off this place, one person, it changes. It comes back different, and it comes back for more, and there is no leaving it be after that, because It'll have learned there's better than cattle out here. So whatever you do, however bad it gets, you keep every living soul off that ground on the still nights. You do not let it get its hands on one of your people. Not your wife, not your brother, not you. Cattle you can lose. Cattle you can start over from. He put a dry hand on my shoulder, which he had never done, and it was surprisingly strong. Keep them close and keep them in, he said, and pray for wind. It don't come on the windy nights, pray for a windy fall. Then he got in his chalky truck and drove home in the last of the light. I sat on my porch in the dark with the yard light buzzing over the empty yard and the north quarter gone to black below me. I did not sleep much. It was a windy night, and I was glad of the wind for the first time in my life. We saw it 4 nights later, on a still one. The wind had blown 3 days and then it quit the way it does out there, quit all at once at sundown like a door closing. The sky went clear. The temperature started to fall. I stood in the yard after supper and felt the stillness come down, and I thought about what Gus had said. I went in and told Dylan we would keep a watch. The cattle were bunched in the near pastures, and the corrals by them, up close, out of the north quarter entirely. I took the first watch, sitting in the dark kitchen with the 30-30 and a cup of coffee and the lights off, looking out the north windows. A little after midnight, the yard light went out. Not burned out. A mercury light does not just quit, and even if it had, the way this went was wrong. It dimmed. Down slow over about 10 seconds, from that hard blue-white down through orange, down to a dull red ember, then nothing. The way a light dies when the power is bleeding out of it. Except that light ran off its own line from the yard pole. There was no storm, no wind, nothing to touch it. I stood up when it started to dim. By the time it was dead, the whole yard was black, and my eyes had to fight for it. That was when I saw the light down in the north quarter. I have tried a lot of times to say what it looked like, and I always come up short, because it did not look like anything I had a word for. It was low, down in the bottom, right about over the draw. Not a beam, not a ball. A kind of glow with an edge to it, a light that lit the ground under it in a circle and did not spill past that circle the way honest light spills, mostly white. But there was a color moving in it, down at the bottom, that I want to call blue and want to call green, and was neither, and my eyes kept sliding off of it. It did not flicker, it did not sweep or search. It hung there, low over the draw, dead steady, and lit a piece of my own ground the size of a corral. It made no sound. That was the worst of it. Standing at my kitchen window, a mile off, no sound. A thing that big and that bright ought to make a sound. An engine, a hum, anything. There was nothing. Just my own blood in my ears, and the house ticking as the heat went out of it because the furnace had quit too, I realized. The fan had stopped, the house had gone silent and started to cool. I got Dylan up. He came out of the bunkhouse in his long johns and his boots with his rifle, and for once in his life he did not say anything smart. We watched it together. I hold on to that we saw it together, that I am not the only one who ever stood and looked at that light over the draw. A man alone with a thing like that starts to doubt his own eyes inside a year. I have had Dylan's word in my memory to hold against the doubt, right up until the doubt stopped mattering. Down in the corrals, the cattle had gone dead quiet. A pen of cattle at night is never silent. There is always some shifting, a cough, a bawl, the rub of a hide on a rail. They had gone silent as stones. When I looked, I could just make them out in the starlight, bunched at the far south rail, every one of them jammed up against the wood as far from the north quarter as the pen would let them get. Heads up, not moving. They knew. They had known before the yard light died. The light hung over the draw the better part of an hour. We watched the whole time. Neither of us said, "Let's go down there." It was not courage, and it was not cowardice. It was Gus Sattler's voice in both our heads saying, "You do not go down there after it," and it was the plain animal sense that a mile was not near far enough, and that closer was madness. Twice Dylan started to say something and stopped. Once, real low, he said, "Travis, that ain't a helicopter." "I know it," I said. That was the whole of our conversation. Then it left. It did not fly off. The glow drew up into itself, got smaller and brighter, and then simply was not there, gone between one blink and the next. The dark came back down over the north quarter, whole and complete. A few seconds later, the yard light came up, dim red, then orange, then that hard, buzzing blue, like nothing had happened. Behind us, in the house, the furnace kicked back on, and the fan started. Down in the corral, a calf bawled, one, and then the ordinary shifting of penned cattle came back. Just a cold, clear night on the high plains with the stars out, and my brother and me standing at a window in the dark, not saying anything. In the morning there was a fifth cow dead in the near pasture. Not the north quarter. The near pasture, the one right below the house. Inside the fence we could see from the kitchen. It was moving toward us. That was the morning Jean stopped humoring me. She had been steady through all of it, steadier than I was. But she had also been treating it a little like my problem, my cattle, my north quarter, the way a marriage divides things up, and she had not seen the light. She had been asleep the night Dylan and I stood at the window. The fifth cow was in the pasture where she hung the wash. She walked out to it with me after breakfast, stood over the clean, bloodless hole in the sealed edges and the one-taken eye, and said nothing for a while. Then she said, "We're not staying here." I told her about Gus. All of it. The still nights, the leaving it be, the selling out. I had not told her the worst part, the part about taking a person, because I had been protecting her the way a man protects somebody he loves from a thing he cannot do anything about, which is not protection at all. It is just loneliness with company. Standing over that cow, I told her that part too. Jean did not fall apart. Tough people do not, they get practical. "All right," she said. "Then we sell and we go." "How fast can we sell?" "Not fast enough," was the honest answer, and this is where the year comes back into it. In a good market, I would have called a buyer, had trucks in the yard in 2 days, and been shed of the whole herd by the weekend. But it was the fall of '74. Every rancher in 6 counties was trying to sell into the same broken market. The buyers knew it. The sale barns were backed up. The trucks were spoken for. I got on the phone. I called a buyer I trusted, a man out of the eastern part of the state, and told him I needed out, all of it, and I would take the hit. He did me the only favor a man could do me in that market. He moved me up his list. He could have trucks to me the following Thursday, 6 days. 6 days to get my whole herd loaded and gone. Until then I had to keep them alive and close and pray for wind, the way Gus said. We got 4 days of wind. I have never in my life been so grateful for the thing that had made me miserable my whole life, that high plains wind that never quits. For 4 days and 4 nights it did not quit. It blew hard out of the southwest, and nothing died, and I began to let myself believe we would make it to Thursday. We kept the cattle in the near pastures and the corrals. We kept the yard lit and the house lit. Dylan moved into the main house with Jean and me, into the spare room, because none of us wanted him alone in the bunkhouse. We did not say that out loud either. We just moved his things. Boone went on the 5th night. The wind had dropped that evening, not all the way, but it had gone soft. I did not like it. I said so at supper, and we kept a watch. Nothing came. No light, no dead engine. I had started to think it was a soft night and not a still one, that there was a difference, that a little wind was enough. In the morning the dog was gone. He had been sleeping in the house those nights, but that 5th evening he had wanted out, scratching at the door the way he did, and Dylan had let him onto the porch. Because a dog that has been an outside dog his whole life will make himself sick, held in. In the morning, Boone was not there. No blood, no hair, no sign of a scuffle. His collar lay on the porch boards in a little coil, the buckle still done up like it had been lifted off over a head that was not there anymore. That was all. That old red heeler had gone the way the cattle went, off the porch of my house, 30 feet from where my brother slept, and left nothing behind but his collar done up in a circle. Dylan did not take it well. He had had that dog since it was a pup, since before our father died. He walked the whole place that morning calling for it. Up and down the draws, out along the fences, his voice going flat across that country and coming back with nothing on it. I let him. There was nothing to say. A man has to walk a thing like that off or it stays in him. When he came back he was white and quiet, and he was not the easy, laughing brother anymore. The thing had reached into our yard and taken something that mattered, something with a name. The line between cattle and people had a dog laid across it now, and the dog was gone. Jean wanted to leave that day. Leave the cattle, she said. Let the bank have them. Let that buyer sort it out. We get in the truck and go to my sister's, and we do not come back until it's over. She was right. I have gone over it 10,000 times, and by every measure that matters, she was right and I was wrong. But I could not do it. Those cattle were not just money to me, though God knows we needed the money. They were the whole of what my family had bled that ground for since Josiah broke it. They were the difference between selling out on my feet and crawling off broke. I had them 4 days from the trucks. I could not make myself walk away from the herd the night before I could save it. I told her 2 more days. I told her the wind would hold. I told her we would ship Thursday and drive out behind the last truck and never look back. She looked at me the way a woman looks at a man she loves who is about to do something that cannot be undone. She did not have the words to stop me, because I did not have the sense to be stopped. That is on me. I have carried a lot out of that fall, and that is the piece I carry closest. She was right, and I did not listen, and it cost us Dylan. Wednesday night the wind quit. It quit at sundown the way it had that first time, all at once, like a hand taken off the world. I stood in the yard and felt the stillness come down, and my stomach went to water. The sky cleared from the west, the clouds tearing off, the stars coming out hard and cold, more of them than a person raised anywhere but out there has ever seen, that whole crushing wheel of them. The temperature started to fall. A hard, clear, still night, the worst kind, the last night before the trucks, and every head of cattle I owned penned and pastured within half a mile of the house. We did everything right that we knew to do. We put the cattle in the 2 big corrals by the barn, the strongest fence on the place, pipe and cable, and chained the gates. We brought the horses into the barn. We lit every light we had. Jean loaded the good rifle and the shotgun and sat in the kitchen with the phone. Dylan and I took the trucks, 1 each, parked nose out for a fast start, and sat up. The plan, if it can be called a plan, was to stay tight in the lit yard with the cattle chained in the strongest pen we had and wait for morning. In the morning the trucks would come and we would load out and go. Keep them close. Keep them in. Wait for day. It came for the cattle a little after 2, and the cattle did the one thing we had not planned for. They went through the fence. I was in my truck in the yard, half dozing. A man does that on a long watch, no matter how scared he is. The body will have its sleep. What woke me was the sound, not the light and not the cold. A corral full of cattle going through a pipe fence is a sound a man feels in his chest before he understands it. A low tearing thunder, hooves and horn, and 800 head of terror all at once. I came up out of that half-sleep with my heart already going, not knowing for a second where I was. The yard light was dead. That was the second thing. The yard was black. The house behind me was black, every window I had left burning gone dark, and out in that blackness my whole herd was tearing itself to pieces against the corral. I could just make them out against the last of the starlight, and what I saw did not make sense. A spooked herd runs from the thing that scares it. These cattle were not running from anything in the yard. They had hit the north fence of the big corral, all of them at once. A wall of animals throwing themselves north, toward the low ground, toward the draw, away from the buildings and the pens and everything a cow knows is safe. The fence was going. I heard the cable sing and snap. I heard pipe bend and give. Then they were through, pouring out through the broke fence, in a black flood, going north, down off the rise, down toward the north quarter. Every head I owned running full out into the dark, toward the one piece of ground on earth I most needed them to stay off of. Dylan's truck fired up beside me. I heard it catch and roar and saw his headlights swing. I did the same, keyed my truck, and it caught. Thank God. We went after them. That is what a stockman does. It is bred so deep it sits under thought. A running herd gets turned. A man does not stop to weigh it. I have tried to be fair to myself about that night, and this is the one place I can be fair, because going after those cattle was not stupidity, and it was not greed. It was the oldest reflex there is. If that light had been anything a man could fight, I would have been right to go. We went down off the rise with our headlights bouncing, the two of us, spread out to flank the herd the way we had flanked 1,000 runs, trying to get ahead of the led cattle and turn them back west, away from the draw. We did not get ahead of them. We were maybe halfway down the long slope, engines screaming in low gear, cattle streaming past us on both sides when both trucks died at once. Mine went first, or they went together, I cannot say. The engine did not sputter or cough. It stopped all at once, and the headlights died with it, and the dash went black. The truck was rolling in gear down a grade, in the dark, with no power and no lights. I stood on the brake. It coasted to a stop in the grass, and sat there. Ahead of me, and a little below, Dylan's truck had gone dark the same way, stopped at an angle in the run of cattle, and the cattle kept going past us, all around us. That black river of them pouring down toward the bottom. There was no engine noise now. None. Just the drum of all those hooves going away down the slope, and then, under it, coming up, the silence. The silence was the center of the whole thing. When the trucks died and the herd ran on past us down the hill, the sound of them going should have faded off ahead of us into the bottom. Instead it stopped. Not faded. Stopped, the way sound stops when a door shuts. I do not mean the cattle stopped running. I could still see them down below, hundreds of them milling in the bottom of the north quarter now. I could not hear them. 800 head of cattle boiling around in the dark a quarter-mile below me, and I could not hear one hoof of it. My own truck door made no sound when I shoved it open and stepped out into the cold. My boots in the grass made no sound. It was like the whole bottom of the north quarter had been dropped into deep water. I stood there in it with my ears straining and ringing and finding nothing. That was when I got scared all the way down. Not the animal jolt of a running herd. The deep cold understanding that I was standing inside the thing now. Whatever drew a circle on the world where engines died and time stopped, I was inside the circle. So were my cattle. So was my brother. The light came up out of the draw. It did not come down out of the sky. Everyone assumes it came down, and maybe it had. Earlier, when I was not looking. What I saw was the light already low, down in the bottom, and it came up. Swelled, the way a coal swells when a man breathes on it. The glow got bigger and brighter and lifted up off the ground, until it stood over the bottom of the north quarter like a second small cold moon sitting on the earth. And it lit everything. It threw that white light with the wrong color moving down at the bottom of it, out across the whole bottom, and in it I could see my whole herd, every animal, and I could see them stop. They stopped all at once. 1 second there were 800 cattle milling and shoving in a panic. The next second they were still, everyone heads up, facing the light, like somebody had thrown a switch. They stood there in that cold white glow, not moving, not making a sound I could hear. A whole herd turned to stone in the bottom of my own north quarter, and Dylan was down there among them. He had gotten farther than me. His truck had died lower on the slope, closer to the bottom, and he was out of it and on foot ahead of me, down near the edge of where the light lay on the ground. A small dark figure against all that white. My brother. I started down toward him. People who were not there have had 20 years of opinions about what I did and did not do down there. I went toward him. The second I understood he was down at the edge of that light, I went down the slope after him as fast as a man can go over rough ground in the dark. I fell twice. I got up twice. I was screaming his name, or trying to, because that silence took my voice too. I opened my mouth and put everything I had into it, and the sound came out of me and went nowhere, died 6 inches from my face, swallowed Dylan. 100 yards below me, never turned, never heard me. There was nothing to hear. I was running down a hill toward my brother, screaming his name at the top of my lungs and making no more sound than a man makes in a dream. The kind where he runs and does not move and calls out and no one hears, except I was moving. I was moving as fast as I could, and it was not fast enough. It was never going to be fast enough. Some part of me knew that already and kept running anyway, because the alternative was to stop, and I was not going to stop. I got maybe halfway down to him before I hit the cold. Not the cold of the night. The night was cold, a hard, clear autumn night dropping toward a frost, and I had been out in it for hours and knew exactly what it felt like. This was another thing. It came up all at once, like walking into water. A cold with a front edge to it, a line I crossed, and on the far side of the line it went into me in a way that had nothing to do with the air. A deep, still, killing cold, coming up through my boots, out of the ground, and down through the top of my head at the same time. My breath quit smoking. There was no warmth left in it to smoke. With the cold came the smell. All that struck match sulfur and the clean hospital under it, but strong now, thick, a smell a man could taste at the back of his throat, and the pressure. There was a weight in the air. It pressed down the way deep water presses, and it pressed harder the closer I got to the light, and it was pushing me down, slowing me. I leaned into it and kept going down that slope toward my brother like a man wading upstream. The pressure grew until every step was a decision. Dylan was at the edge of the light. I could see him clear now, close enough. 100 feet, maybe less. I stopped trying to yell, 'cause it was pointless, and I just went, and I watched him while I went. What I saw I have never told all of. Not to Jean, not to the sheriff, not to the men who came after. There are no words that carry it, and saying it out loud makes it a thing that happened instead of a thing I dreamed, and most days I need it to be a thing I dreamed. But I will say it. He was not frozen like the cattle. The cattle stood around him like statues, hundreds of them, heads up, facing the light. He moved among them. He was walking. Slow, easy. Walking toward the center of the light, toward the source of it, down in the draw. His head was up. His shoulders were down. Nothing in the way he moved looked like a man being dragged or forced. He looked like a man walking out to watch a sunrise. He had left his rifle somewhere. His hands hung open at his sides, and once, just once, as I came down screaming with no sound, he turned his head. Not all the way, just a little, toward me. I saw the side of his face in that cold white light, and he was not afraid. I have never been able to put that down, and I have never been able to pick it back up. My brother was not afraid. There was a thing on his face I had seen exactly once before, when he was small, on Christmas morning, coming down the stairs. That open, lifted, wondering look a child gets. He had it on his grown face, walking into that light. Then he turned back toward the center and kept going, and I understood that whatever was in there had reached into my brother and taken the fear out and put that in its place. And it was worse than any scream could have been. A screaming man is still there to be reached. A man walking into it glad is already gone. I hit the edge of the light and I could not go in. This is the part I have had to live inside of. I did not fail to go in. My legs stopped. I came down that slope with everything I had, meaning to go into that light after my brother and drag him out or go wherever he went. I hit the edge of it, the place where the flattened grass began, and my body stopped at that line and would not cross it. It was not a choice I made. It was the way a man's hand comes off a hot stove before he decides to move it. Everything in me that keeps a body alive without asking the man who lives in it seized up at that line and locked my legs. My brother was 40 feet away inside it, walking away from me, and I could not take one more step. I have hated my own legs for 20 years. I have also come to understand that if they had carried me in there would have been 2 of us in that ring at dawn instead of 1, and no one left alive to say what happened. Both things are true. I stood at the line and could not cross it, and it saved my life, and I will never forgive it. I was at the edge when it took him. I did not see the whole of it, and I am glad I saw the light change. Down at the center, where Dylan was walking, the glow drew in and brightened, the way it had the first night when it left that same gathering. The wrong color at the bottom of it came up strong. There was a shape down in it, or shapes. I could not hold them with my eyes. They kept sliding off. The way my eyes slid off the color angles down in the light my head could not keep. My brother walked in among them, small and dark, then lit up white as he went into the brightest part. Then the light flared. One hard pulse. It whited out the whole bottom of the north quarter and threw my own shadow on the grass behind me, black and sharp. I got my arm up over my eyes. When I brought it down, the light was smaller, drawing up into itself, the way it had before. The cattle were still standing. My brother was not there. He was just not there. No body falling, no cry, nothing thrown clear. Where Dylan had been there was cold white ground and standing cattle and the light pulling up off the earth. He was gone out of the middle of it the way a word is gone off a chalkboard when the hand wipes it. Complete, clean, leaving only the faint sense that something had been written there. Then it started to come toward me. The light lifted off the ground. It did not go straight up, and it did not go small the way it had the first night. It came, slid up the slope toward the edge where I stood, low. The cold came with it. The pressure came with it. The standing cattle nearest the light began to move again. Not to run, to turn their heads and follow it as it came. I understood in the animal bottom of me that it was not finished. It had taken the cattle and taken my brother, and it was still hungry, or still curious, or still whatever it was, and I was the next warm thing on that slope. I did the only thing my body would let me do, the thing it had wanted to do since the cold first hit me. I ran. I ran back up the slope the way I had come, and this time the pressure was behind me instead of in front of me, pushing me. I went up that hill faster than the down had been, falling, getting up, the cold on my back like a hand, the smell of struck matches all around me. I did not look behind me. There are things a man knows without being taught, and one of them is that he does not look behind him at the thing that is gaining. He puts everything into his legs and goes. And I felt it gaining. I felt the cold reach up over the back of my neck like fingers made out of winter. I felt the pressure bear down until my ears were full of it. I ran through it, up the long slope, with my chest tearing, and I was going to lose. I was slowing, and it was not. Then I crossed the edge. I crossed the edge, and everything came back at once. I did not know there was an edge on this side until I was through it. One stride I was in the cold and the silence and the pressure with the thing on my neck. The next stride the world came back. All of it, all at once. Like coming up out of a dive, and the noise of it almost put me down. Sound. My own boots hitting the ground. My own breath sawing in and out. Loud and ragged and real. A little wind come up out of nowhere, moving the grass. And behind me, when I finally dared to turn, the light hung down in the bottom of the north quarter over the draw, and it had stopped. It sat at the edge of its own circle, the near edge, the edge I had just crossed, and it did not come past it. It hung there, low and cold and bright, right at the line, the way a dog hits the end of a chain. I stood on the far side of that line, on ground where the wind blew, and my heart hammered and my breath smoked in the ordinary air. I looked back at the thing that had my brother. It could not reach me. I could not reach him. The line between us was a foot of dead grass I had crossed by luck and could not cross back. I do not know how long I stood there. Long enough. The light hung at the edge, and then it lost interest in me, or finished whatever the finishing was, and it drew up off the ground, up and back, smaller and brighter, and went out. Gone between one breath and the next, the same as always. The dark came down over the north quarter. The stars came back. Out of that dark, one at a time, the cattle that were left began to bawl. Not all of them, the ones that could. Down at the yard behind me, the mercury light came up dim red, then orange, then that hard familiar blue, and it buzzed, and it was the most beautiful ugly sound I have ever heard. I stood on the slope in the cold and shook and could not make myself walk down into the bottom to look for what I already knew was not there to find. Jean found me on the slope at first light. She had watched the whole of it from the kitchen window in the dark. The light, the dead yard lamp, the two of us going down, the trucks dying, one small figure coming back up the hill in the dawn, and one not. She had tried the phone, and the phone was dead the whole time the light was up. She had loaded the shotgun and stood in the door, and every sense she had told her to run down that hill to us, and every scrap of sense she had left kept her in the house, because she could see the light, and she could see that going into it was going into it. She had done the hardest thing a person can do, which was nothing, which was wait and be the one alive to find me. She came up the hill in the gray light, in her coat with the shotgun still in her hands. She got to me where I stood at the line, looking down into the bottom, and she looked down into it too. The sun came up on the north quarter. The frost was on everything, silver. The two trucks sat dead and cockeyed on the slope where they had died. Down in the bottom around the draw, my cattle lay dead in a ring. I counted them later. 40 head. The ones that had been closest to the light, dead where they stood, dropped in a rough circle around the pressed and scorched ground at the center. Every one of them, when we got down to them, cut the clean, bloodless way. Cored and emptied and sealed. 40 of them. My whole front rank of cattle laid out in a ring like an offering, like the thing had worked its way through them one at a time in the hour it stood there and taken from each what it took. And in the middle of the ring, on the scorched bare ground where the light had stood, there was my brother's hat. Just his hat. Right side up, sitting on the dead ground in the middle of the ring of dead cattle, the frost coming up white all around it, and not one crystal of it on the hat. That is where the story of my brother ends. We never found one thing more of him, not that morning and not ever. One hat sitting in the middle of a ring of our own cored cattle, in the bottom of ground my grandfather had known enough to keep us off of. Me and Jean standing at the edge of it in the frost, and the sun coming up like it did every other day of the world. The men came the second day. I spent the first day doing the things a man does, because the things are all that hold him up. I got the trucks running once the sun was well up. Both of them first turned the key, like there had never been a thing wrong with them, and I hated them for it. I drove up to the house and called the sheriff. I called Doc. I called the buyer to tell him not to send the trucks, that there would be no shipment, that I did not have a herd to ship anymore, and he was kind and said the things a person says. I did not call Dylan's name out into the draws the way he had called Boone's. I had stood at the edge of that ring, and I knew there was no calling that would bring him. A man cannot do that twice in one family in 1 week and stay a man. Jean called her sister. The sheriff came, and Doc came, and they stood at the edge of the ring in the frost with me, and neither of them had a word to say. Ward took out his little book and did not write in it for a long time. I gave the sheriff everything. Every bit of it. I told Ward the whole of it, the light, the dead engines, the silence, my brother walking in. I showed him the ring and the 40 head and the hat. I gave him the Polaroids, the whole coffee can of them, weeks of them. Ward was not a bad man, and he stood there in the frost, and I watched him try to find the place in his head to put what I was telling him, and there was no place, the same as there had been no place in mine. Finally he closed his little book. "Travis," he said, "I believe that you believe every word of that." And I knew right then how it was going to go. They came the next morning, before the sheriff's report was even typed, which is a thing I only understood the size of later. 2 cars, both of them that flat government green, no markings. 4 men in them, and 1 more in the 3rd car behind. They were not from Pell County, and they were not from the state, and to this day I cannot say for certain who they were. Town clothes, suits under canvas coats, town shoes that were wrong from my yard. The one who did the talking showed me a card in a leather fold and took it back too fast for me to read more than an eagle and a lot of small print. He gave me a name, Rennick. I never knew if it was his. They were polite. That politeness is what has stayed with me, how sorry they said they were for my loss, how quietly and completely they took my life apart. Rennick sat at my kitchen table with his hat in his lap and told me he understood I had suffered a terrible thing. A rustling operation, he called it. A sophisticated one, working ranches across several states. My brother had most likely come upon them in the act and been taken. Or worse, it was a federal matter now. They would be handling it. They would find the people responsible. He said it smooth and slow and sad, looking right at me, and every word of it was a lie, and he knew that I knew, and he did not care, because the lie was not for me. The lie was for the report, and the newspaper, and the county, and the world. The lie was the shape they were going to press down over the top of my brother, and my believing it was not required. They took the pictures. Rennick asked, real gentle, whether I had taken any photographs for the insurance. I have thought since that the gentleness of the asking was its own kind of threat. I went out to the machine shed and got the coffee can, because the sheriff had handed it back to me the day before, saying it would mean nothing to a court, and I gave it to them, all of it, and Rennick thanked me. They took the samples too, the ones Doc had. I learned later they had gone to Doc the same day, before they came to me, and taken his jars and his write-up and left him the same sad, polite story. Doc had been a straight man his whole life, and he would not talk about it after, would not meet my eye at the cafe. I do not blame him. Whatever they said to him, they said in a way a man does not argue with. They took what could be photographed and measured and proved. They left me the hat, because a hat is nothing. A hat proves nothing. A hat is just a sad object a grieving man keeps. And they left me the story, the rustling story, and they made it clear, without one hard word, that the story was the price of being left alone. A man with a wife and a mortgage and a dead brother had better things to do than argue with the government about a light in the sky. I kept 2 pictures back. I do not fully know why. When I went out to the shed for the coffee can, some cold part of me that had been keeping a record all fall took 2 of the Polaroids out and put them in my shirt pocket before I carried the rest in. One is the first heifer, the clean bore, and the sealed edge, with my pocket knife laid across for size. The other is a ring, the pressed grass and the scorched center, taken in flat morning light, so the sharp edge of it shows the line where the flat grass stops. They are not proof of anything. Rennick was right about that. A burned patch of grass is a burned patch of grass, and a cut cow is a cut cow. I have held those 2 little white frame pictures up in front of more than one person over the years, and watched their eyes do the same thing Ward's did. Slide off, look for the place to put it, find no place. But I kept them, and I keep them, because they are the only thing left in the world outside my own head that says the thing was real. That says, I did not dream my brother into a light. Some nights that is the only thing standing between me and the version where I simply lost my mind one fall and lost my brother some ordinary way and built a monster over the top of it to keep from looking. The pictures say no. The pictures say it was real. I need them to keep saying it. The report, when it was filed, said what Rennick said it would say. I have a copy. It took me 2 years and a lawyer to get it, and it runs 3 pages. It says that on the night in question, an organized livestock theft operation struck the Harlan Ranch in Pell County. That 40 head of cattle were slaughtered on site by parties unknown, using methods consistent with an ongoing multi-state pattern, and that Dylan Harlan, 29, was reported missing the same night and was presumed to have encountered the perpetrators. There is a case number on it. I am not going to say it out loud even now, all these years later, because it is the number they filed my brother under instead of the truth, and saying it gives it something it has not earned. It sits in a drawer in a county building, that number, and it will read as the truth 100 years from now, because a typed report is a thing the world knows how to believe, and a light that took a man out of the middle of his own cattle is not. I know which one is true. Now that Gus is gone, I am the only one left who was there and knows. Gus is the last of it, because Gus is the one who told me why my grandfather kept us off that ground, and it was not bad grass. I went to see him a week after. I had to. Gus had told me the still nights and the dead engines and the leaving it be. He had told me the one thing above all others, to keep it off my own people, and I had lost my brother off my own place 4 days later. I needed to look the old man in the face and hear the rest, because now I knew there was a rest. He was expecting me, had coffee on. We sat in his kitchen, which smelled of an old man living alone, wood smoke and liniment and coffee. For a while he did not say anything. Then he said he was sorry about Dylan in a way that told me he had known Dylan would be the one, or that someone would be, from the morning he stood by my truck and would not go down into the North Quarter. And then Gus Sattler told me the thing my family had spent 3 generations turning into 2 words about bad grass. Your granddad had a brother, he said. I knew that. Ilias. He came out with Josiah, broke the ground with him. There is an Elias Harlan on the little stone in our family plot with no dates that fit a natural life, and I had asked about him as a boy and been told he died young. The flat took him, and I had let it lie, the way a man lets the old sorrows of a family lie. Gus told me how the flat took him. In the early years, before there were fences to speak of, the Harlans had run cattle down in that low ground by the draw, day and night, because it was the best shelter and the best grass in a dry country, and they did not know any better yet. One fall the cattle started dying down there, cut and bled white and untracked. The same, exactly the same. Josiah and Elias sat up over their stock, the same as Dylan and I had, 2 brothers with rifles. On a still clear cold night the light came up out of the draw, and Elias went down into it, and Josiah did not, and only Josiah came back up the hill in the morning. The same, Gus said. Down to the hat, near enough. He was younger than me when he told me, and I have never told it to a living soul, because Josiah made me swear it as a boy after I wormed it out of my own father, and a man kept his word to Josiah Harlan. He told me, because I was going to be the neighbor. He told me so that if it ever woke up again on that ground, there would be somebody on the next place who knew what it was, and could warn whoever had the Harlan place, so nobody would ever have to learn it the way he learned it. Standing at the edge of that light, watching his brother walk into it, he looked at me across the table, and his old eyes were wet. I failed him, Gus said. I warned you too late. I should have come the day I heard about the first heifer. I told myself it was old foolishness, an old man's story, that it had been 60 years and more, and the ground had gone quiet. I told myself what you told yourself, and your brother paid for it, same as Elias, and I have to carry that up the hill with me. And I will, and it is right that I should. I did not let him carry it alone. It was not his to carry, and I told him so, and I meant it, because if there was blame, it was mine. I was the one who would not leave when Jean said leave. I was the one who went down the hill after the cattle. But sitting in that kitchen, I understood the shape of the thing my family had been living on top of for 3 generations without knowing it. It was not bad grass. It was a thing that lived in that low ground, or came to it, or slept in it. Something my grandfather had watched take his brother, and had spent the rest of his life keeping the rest of us away from the only way he knew how. He made a rule with no reason attached to it and enforced it every fall, until the reason wore off and only the rule was left. Keep the cattle off the North Quarter after dark. Bad ground. He could not say the true thing. The true thing had cost him a brother, and no one would have believed it, and it would have marked the Harlans as a family of crazy people in a country where a man's name was all the credit he had. So he buried it. He buried it so deep that by the time it came down to me, it was not even a warning anymore. It was a habit, a thing we did. And a habit is a warning with the fear taken out, and the fear is the part that saves a man. I had the rule my whole life. I kept it my whole life. I just did not know it was a rule against anything, so the one fall it mattered I did not know to be afraid. I fed the thing my grandfather had starved. It woke up, and it took the next Harlan brother the way it took the first. Gus told me one more thing, and it is the thing I have carried longest. Longer even than the grief, because grief settles, and this does not. It comes back, he said. That is the whole of what I know, and it is the worst of it. It took Elias when Josiah was a young man. It took your Dylan when you are middle-aged. That is a long time between a man's whole life, near enough, long enough that every time the people on that ground have forgotten to be afraid, which I have come to think is not an accident. I have come to think the forgetting is part of how it feeds. He wrapped his hands around his cup. It is out there now, quiet, in that low ground or wherever it goes when it sleeps, and it will be quiet a long time, long enough that you will be an old man or a dead one before it stirs. Whoever is on the Harlan place then will not know, unless somebody tells them, and there will be no Gus Sattler on the next place to do the telling, because I am the last of us, and I am nearly done. He looked at me. So, you are the warning now. You are the only one who will carry it forward. Whatever you do with the rest of your life, you make sure that ground never gets forgotten again. You make sure it stays a rule with the fear left in it, because it will come back, and it will be hungry, and it will find whoever is standing on that low ground on a still night, not afraid. We sold out that winter. There was not much to sell by then. A broken herd and a mortgaged place in the worst cattle market in 40 years. We took what we could get, which was little, and the bank took the rest. I signed the Harlan place away at a lawyer's table in Collie, with Jean beside me. 3 generations of it. The soddy site, the frame house, the barn my father was born beside, the north quarter with its ring of dead ground, all of it gone in an afternoon for a figure that would embarrass me to say. I did not fight it. A man will fight to the last ditch for his ground. It is bred into him the same as turning a herd, and I did not have 1 ounce of that fight left, because the ground had taken my brother, and I could not stand on it any more. Every time I looked north out the kitchen window, I saw that light. Every still clear night, I lay awake with my heart going. Jean would put her hand on my chest in the dark, and I could not tell her it was all right, because it was not, and it was never going to be, and the only mercy left to us was distance. So we took the distance, we left the flats. I made 1 condition of the sale, and the lawyer thought me strange for it, and I did not explain, because there was no explaining that would not sound like madness. I made them write into the papers that the north quarter, the low ground by the draw, was not to be grazed or built on. I dressed it up as a conservation thing. Alkali and erosion, bad water. The buyer did not care. It was poor ground anyway. So it went into the papers. A Harlan keeping people off that ground one last time, the only way I had left, with a line of legal print instead of a rule handed down. I do not know if it held. Papers get lost. Land gets resold. Lines of print wear off the same as habits do. Some nights that is what I think about. Whether that line is still in a deed in a drawer in Collie, or whether it wore off the way bad grass wore off, and whether there are cattle down in that draw tonight. On a still cold night, with nobody sitting up, we moved east and down, off the high plains entirely, to a little place in the breaks of a river valley. The land there is broken and wooded and close. A man cannot see more than a quarter mile in any direction, because there is always a hill or a stand of cottonwoods in the way, and I chose it for exactly that. I cannot live any more where I can see a long way under a big sky, Jean understood. She has understood a great deal for a long time, and asked me to explain very little of it, which is its own kind of love, maybe the truest kind, the kind that lets a man keep the door shut on the room he cannot go into. We are old now, the both of us. We never did have children. I used to grieve that. Somewhere in the years after the flats, I stopped grieving it, because I could not have raised a child on the truth I carry, and I could not have raised one on a lie. And the thought of a boy of mine some day standing on open ground, on a still night, not afraid, is a thing I am glad I never have to be afraid of. Small mercies. A man takes the mercies he can find. I never went back. I heard things over the years, the way a man hears things. The Harlan place changed hands a time or 2, ran sheep for a while, sat empty. I never heard that anyone died there, and I have chosen to take the not hearing as good news, though I know better than to trust it, because I know how these things get written up. A man cut and bled white in a low draw goes in the county book as a rustling, or a hunting accident, or a fellow who wandered off. The same as my brother went in the book as a rustling. The same as Elias went in whatever they had for a book back in 18 and something. The true things do not go in the books. The books are for the story the world can stand to read. What is true stays out on the ground, in the low places, on the still nights, in the families that kept the rule until they forgot why. And in the 2 Polaroids in my desk drawer that I take out sometimes and hold, the cut heifer and the burned ring, the only 2 witnesses I did not hand over. They are not proof, and they never will be, and I keep them anyway. On the still nights, the clear, cold ones where the wind lays down at sundown and the sky fills up with more stars than a person ought to be able to see, I still go through the house and turn on the lights. All of them. And I sit up. There is nothing out here in the breaks to come down over anything. No low alkali draw, no herd, nothing it would want. I know that, and I do it anyway, because my grandfather made a rule and buried the fear in it, and I have spent my whole life learning that the fear was the part that mattered, and I am not going to be the one who lets it wear off. So I keep the fear. I sit up on the still nights with the lights burning, and I think about my brother's face turned toward that cold white light with no fear in it at all, walking in glad, and I stay afraid for the both of us, and I watch the dark until the wind comes back or the sun does, and then I go to bed. It is not much of a thing to do with a life, keeping a fear alive, but somebody warned Josiah, and Josiah warned Gus, and Gus warned me. Too late for Dylan, but not too late to hand on, and the handing on is the only thing I have found that the light cannot take. So I hand it on. A man keeps off the low ground on the still nights. When the engine dies, he is already inside it, and the only way out is back the way he came, and he goes, and he does not look behind him, and he does not go in after what it has already taken, and he does not ever, whatever it costs him, let it get its hands on one of his own. Cattle a man can start over from, the rest of it he cannot.